I think probably everybody received, whether you opened it or not is another matter, but received the newsletter this week. Um, as a would-be writer, I couldn't help but be pleased with the alliteration of the pantry and the pandemic. Um, it was just fun as that occurred. Um, but there's more to it than just the fun of language and having come up with something that made me smile. As you know, and many thanks to Andrea Goodman, a Sangha member who's not here this morning. I presume she's at her nursing duties. Andrea is a at-home nurse, visiting home visiting nurse, and dealing with a lot of coronavirus, COVID-19 patients right now. So she said she hoped to make it this morning, but wasn't sure that she could. But anyway, Andrea, out of wanting to create more of a sense of community for the Zen Center, said, why don't we do a book club? And to which we said, that's great. Why don't you lead it? And she took those reins and ran with it. And so this Tuesday evening at 6 p.m., we'll send the link around. We will be having our first installment of what we're loosely calling Dharma Dive, which is where we will pick different books from our curriculum or books of interest and spend time together casually, having fun with them, working through them, uncovering layers of meaning on, as we can. The book that was picked to start with is Bernie Glassman's book. What year is that from, did you say? 1997. Bernie Glassman, and I think Rick Fields was the co-author. And it's called Instructions to the Cook. And it's a little book. It's a fun book. Some of you may have already spent some time with it, but it is Bernie's take on and reflection on the 13th century classic Instructions to the Zen Cook by Dogen Roshi. And I have both versions here from the 13th century, not an original manuscript, and Bernie Glassman's book, which we'll be working with. But this morning I wanted to take some time and set the context, not just because we're doing book club and because we're studying this book, but because Instructions to the Zen Cook, or as the older book is also titled, How to Cook Your Life, is not just about the kitchen, but it's about our lives. And with all of us in stay-at-home orders and restaurants closed and, access to takeout and pickup and delivery, but a lot of us cooking more, it also just seemed appropriate. And as you know, and I've stated, I love to cook, right? It's one of my passions from an early age, and then that got linked, as you may have read the story, to a love of the earth and the garden and growing ingredients and bringing them into the kitchen and preparing meals out of what came out of the garden. And of course, Lori and I share that, both love of cooking and of the garden. And right after we got married in the late 80s in Seattle, or I guess even during our engagement, we had a pea patch garden in Seattle that we attended to. And then, as many of you know, this all culminated a few years ago in spending 6 years on a farm in New Mexico growing garlic. So that's kind of taking to an extreme how to get the very best favorite ingredient, because garlic is one of our favorite ingredients. And if you're going to get garlic the way you want it, why not grow it, right? And grow it we did, winning blue ribbons at the local county fair. Of course, the county fair, the whole county had 23,000 people in it, so you have to calibrate that. But anyway, this love and obsession with ingredients and the source of things and how you put things together. And then at Santa Monica Zen Center in the day, Jennifer and Jenny decided, without me having much to do with the decision, that I was going to be trained as the next Tenzo. And I think that, after a dozen years of doing it, they were just ready to hand it to somebody else. But it was a good choice, and it served my training well. A Tenzo is usually in a monastic setting, it is usually a senior monk. It's one of the 6 senior positions in the monastery. And on one level, the role of the Tenzo is simply to prepare the meals, to sustain the Sangha, to make sure that the monks and staff are nourished and can maintain their practice in the best way possible. So it's, Tenzo, mom, dad, brother, sister, whoever you're cooking for, whether you're cooking for yourself or others. At that level, it's the same job, right? Prepare meals, take care of the family, take care of the Sangha, right? In Zen terminology, feed and sustain the 3 treasures, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Now, feeding the Sangha is obvious because there are people in the flesh, right? And they need to eat. So that makes sense. So how is it that we're feeding the Dharma, the teachings? And how is it as a cook, we are feeding the Buddha? Now, the Buddha, we've talked about many times, if each of us is the Buddha, then even feeding the Buddha becomes somewhat linear and practical, right? Because if I'm cooking for you, then I'm cooking for Buddha. If you're cooking for me, you're cooking for Buddha. We're holding each other and taking care of each other as Buddha, or as it translates, awakened ones, those who are awake, those who are aware, right? Aware to what's going on right now, not to necessarily the delusions and thoughts and opinions and beliefs in our head, but the ones who are awake to what's happening right now, right here, so that we can take pure action. And then how is it that we're feeding the teachings? It's interesting, this book, How to Cook Your Life, is 122 pages long. Dogen's writing on instructions to the cook, which is called the Tenzo Kyoken, is 14 pages long. Now, you've all heard me say, don't go grab books and don't go read everything. Don't spend all your time doing that. More Zazen, practice. It's the experience. It's not the intellectualism. But I have to say, reviewing these 14 pages, if you want to read something that encompasses all of the training and the essential point of Zen, these 14 pages of the Tenzo Kyoken would be a good place to start. Now, maybe it's just my relationship to food and cooking, but as I was going over this last night and again this morning, I was frankly brought to tears with some of the things in here. And there's too much to go into in a short talk this morning. So you may want to look at that. These 14 pages are a little instruction manual. It's kind of like the Zen manual for dummies, to the cook. And it's very specific on one hand about the sequence of washing the rice and picking out the sand, of washing the ladle and the spatulas, of what time to go to bed as the tenzo, what time to get up, right? I mean, it's very, very, very specific on one hand. And yet it also opens up very broadly to why should this matter? Dogen says, this work of the tenzo has always been carried out by teachers settled in the way and by others who have aroused the bodhisattva spirit within themselves. Such a practice requires exerting all your energies. If a person entrusted with this work lacks such a spirit, then he or she will only endure unnecessary hardships and suffering that will have no value in their pursuit of the way. In other words, there's the job, but there's the spirit and intention in doing the job. What is that job, right? The job is looking at the ingredients at hand and what can I make of it? Now I'm talking about cooking, I'm talking about our life. What is here right now? What do I have to work with it, and what will I cook? How will I cook today? How will I cook tomorrow? How am I going to cook my life? What recipe will I follow? In some of the business training that I do, I often use this metaphor, and it probably is stolen from Dogen without me knowing it, but it works well out there. Because companies and teams often talk about what values or attributes, what things they want to manifest, what they want to accomplish in the world, what tools do they have to work with, what assets, what liabilities. And my point often in those talks in the business context is you are talking about the ingredients in your pantry. You're talking about the flour, the baking soda, the baking powder, the sugar, the salt, the eggs, the milk, or the non-dairy equivalent of milk. You're spending all of your time talking about the ingredients. What the hell is it that you want to bake? And if you don't know what you want to bake, all the ingredients in the world mean nothing at all, right? Because all the ingredients I just listed can make pancakes, bread, cake, right? Any number of other things that are not coming to mind. You've got these ingredients, but what is your intention? Why are you doing it? And this is the role of the tenzo at that level. Looking at the Sangha, looking at all the people taking part in sesshin, looking at the teacher, the other staff members. What do they need? Now, in the context of cooking for a Zen center, especially for a group in sesshin, it gets very specific because you want to provide comfort and you want to give people a little bit of smile in that moment where they get to eat and not be doing Zazen, but you don't want to create too much attachment to the food. You don't want to overspice it. You don't want to create food that is going to be inappropriate for the next 3 periods of Zazen. I remember one time Jikyo Roshi was visiting and I really screwed up. It was the evening soup. And I put so much chili powder in that soup. It's like the way I like to cook at home, but I slipped up even from that. And Jikyo took one bite and almost 1 spoonful of this soup. And could hardly keep it in her mouth. And there I had a whole room full of people with this highly spiced soup. You know, it's like their final meal of the day after all of this Zazen. And they've got this fire going in their mouths, right? You know, so you're not supposed to do that as a Zendo. So that also brings, as a Tenzo, so that also brings in this question of what is appropriate, or right place, right person, right time, right amount, which is also the way we can approach our lives. Like, out of all of the ingredients we have, out of all the skills we have, how do I best apply them? When do I apply them? With whom? To what degree? Now, speaking of ingredients, Dogen says, and this is like a koan, guys that are working on koans, maintain an attitude that tries to build great temples from ordinary greens, that expounds the Buddha Dharma through the most trivial activity. When making a soup with ordinary greens, do not be carried away by feelings of dislike toward them, nor regard them lightly. Neither jump for joy simply because you have been given ingredients of superior quality to make a special dish. By the same token that you do not indulge in a meal because of its particularly good taste, there is no reason to feel an aversion toward an ordinary one. So in our house, Lori and Nick, when he's here, they love beets. I don't like beets. I just don't like them. And it's always a bit of training for me because I just don't want to eat them. And why should I? And at the same time, there's this is the meal in front of me. And this is a beautiful thing that has come out of the ground. And why am I so attached to, I don't like this? In the instructions to the Zen Cook, Dogen goes on to apply this to people. Now, he's talking about it in a monastic sense, but we can apply it more broadly. Saying, I'm paraphrasing here, just because somebody is more skilled or less skilled, or more intelligent or less intelligent, or further along the path or less far along the path, do not judge them because they are the Sangha. They are the Dharma. They are the Buddha. Each of us, in our own way, at our own place on the path, with our own skills or lack thereof, contributes. And if ever there was a time in our society to be applying that bit of instruction to the cook, wouldn't that be helpful? To see somebody as a vital or critical ingredient in this big cosmic dish that maybe we don't even know the name of the meal, but perhaps we should trust that that ingredient has its reason, has its place. He also talks about aspiring to carry the practice forward diligently and with impeccability, and in a way that elevates the history of all the ancestors without being arrogant. We must aspire to the highest of ideals without becoming arrogant in our manner. So this is a little bit like me getting trained as Tenzo at Santa Monica Zen Center in an car repair shop, right? With a kitchen that was kind of half a kitchen. And here I am reading Dogen going, I'm going to be the best Tenzo that there ever was in the history of Zen, right? Now, on one hand, that's arrogant as hell. And on the other hand, why don't we aspire? Why don't we aspire to take these teachings, to take what we know, to take who we are forward in a way that elevates it all, that's never been done in our particular way? Dogen says, these things are truly just a matter of course, approaching our lives this way. Yet we remain unclear about them because our minds go racing about like horses running wild in the fields, while our emotions remain unmanageable, like monkeys swinging in the trees. If only we would step back to carefully reflect on the horse and the monkey, our lives would naturally become one with our work. Doing so is the means whereby we turn things even while simultaneously we are being turned by them. It is vital that we clarify and harmonize our lives with our work and not lose sight of either the absolute or the practical. So we talked a little bit about this in the last 2 weeks about seeing everything we're doing in this period of lockdown and beyond, everything that we're doing as sacred, everything that we're doing as a manifestation of the teachings, right? Now, for me, it's very easy to do that with cooking. I can completely get lost in chopping an onion, right? And then sauteing that onion and putting together the spices that you saw in the bowl and the photo in the newsletter. Handle even a single leaf of green in such a way that it manifests the body of the Buddha. This in turn allows the Buddha to manifest through the leaf. This is a power which you cannot grasp with your rational mind. It operates freely according to the situation in the most natural way. At the same time, this power functions in our lives to clarify and settle activities and is beneficial to all living beings. So this is the seemingly trivial and mundane tasks of our lives as sacred if we approach them that way, as contributing to the goodness and wellness of everyone. And I think there's an interesting point of view there on cooking and living is who are you cooking for and who are you living for? I know for me, when I'm cooking for myself or living for myself, when the thing that is most present is what do I want, that's generally when things start breaking down. And when things are breaking down, my quickest path out of it is who can I cook for? Who am I living for? Who is this Sunday Dharma talk for, right? Why are we ringing the bell at 5:30 in the morning? Now, of course, there's an element of me and I and we and us in it for all of us, right? Because we are searching for peace and equanimity. We're in this practice for a reason, and we have ourselves in it. But it does open up quite a bit when you're cooking for someone else. And then I was thinking that there are a lot of people. I have Lori here in lockdown, and that's convenient, right? And this thing of, well, don't cook for yourself, cook for Lori, get off of it, right? But what if you truly are by yourself? Then it's how you hold that cooking in one way, just how you hold the context, of course. But there's also like cook double and deliver the second half to your neighbor, right? There's always some practical way to handle this. But more important is the way we hold it. Is this for me or is it for other? I mean, the role of the tenso is such a blessed role because you're given this job of taking care of other people. There's the parameters for it. There's the kitchen, there's the food, there's the kind of food you're going to cook. There's the cookbook that you're handed that has the tradition of the different meals. But ultimately is take care of those people, right? And so in a way, it's a very easy way to practice Zazen because you've got a job and the job is called serve, right? When we're sitting there on the cushion by ourselves, it's not always so easy to remember that. I could go on and on, but I don't want our time to go on and on. So I'll finish with Dogen's finish. Be very clear about this. All the great teachers down through the ages have learned the meaning of magnanimity, not merely for writing it down, the character for it, but through the various events and circumstances of their lives. All the teachers down through the ages have learned the meaning of magnanimity, not merely from writing the character for it, so not the intellectual endeavor, but through the various events and circumstances of their lives. Even now, we can clearly hear their voices expounding the most fundamental truths and ramifications of these truths for our lives. They were people whose eyes were open to what is most vital in a life of practice, enabling us to have contact with the Buddha, or the reality of life. Their very lives manifested the sole purpose of the true self. Whether you are the head of a temple, a senior monk, an officer of the temple, an ordinary monk, or the everyday Zen practitioner, do not forget the attitude behind living out your life with joy, having the deep concern of a parent, and carrying out all your activities with magnanimity. So I could go back and spend another 10 minutes. There's a lot in there. Approaching things like a parent with the love that we naturally have for a child. Written by Dogen in the spring of 1237 at Koshoji for followers of the way in succeeding generations. 1237, the year 1237, written by Dogen for followers of the way in succeeding generations. And here we are. How will we cook our lives? What meal are we preparing? Who are we preparing it for? And what diligence will we take in caring for the ingredients in preparing that meal? Varda, yes, you can see Lori. I'm going to change the view right now because we're recording and posting these. It's hard if she's always just sitting there on the camera for 20 or 30 minutes. So I want to stop my formal part of the talk there and open it to questions, answers, commentary, anything that anybody would like to say. So I'm going to change the gallery view, and there's Lori. Magic. And we'll put her center screen one of these days and let her do a talk. Anyway, welcome everybody. Just feel free to unmute yourself and share or ask as you will. Go ahead, Patrick.
Which were you reading from, the Bernie Glassman or the 14-page instruction manual there?
14-page instruction manual. I was reading from Dogen's original text.
Oh, okay.
All right. Or the translation of it, obviously. But yeah, the Tenzo Kyoken, Instructions for the Cook. It's in a book where the rest of the book is commentary by Kosho Uchiyama Roshi. And it's like 1980 something, the commentary. So, this much of the book is commentary, but it's really only 14 pages were Dogen's instructions. So I was reading from that. And then the book we're going to work with on Tuesday evenings is Bernie Glassman's book, which is an even later take on Instructions to the Cook, but also has a history of what they went through in establishing the Zen Center back in New York City and the Greystone Bakery and all of that. But what I was reading from was directly Dogen. I made a couple of substitutions, and I tend to do this it may be sacrilege, but it feels right. Everything from the 1200s is he and him, and he and the men who do this. And So when I'm reading, I often will substitute he or she or they, or make it pronoun neutral because it feels right.
But
The Dogen, my apologies. But other than that, that's verbatim.
thank you.
I looked up the word magnanimity because that wasn't really clear. The quality of being magnanimous, loftiness of spirit, enabling one to bear trouble calmly, to disdain meanness and pettiness, and to display a noble generosity. In a sentence, he had the magnanimity to forgive her for lying about him. I think that's kind of a lost art because, we're always being fed so much information about the other side of what we think of, and we get so lathered with that stuff. It's like, okay, I'm just going to hold steady here. So I like that definition. Love it that he used that word.
Yeah, even though I can't say it.
It's tough.
Magnanimity.
Any questions?
I just have a comment. I love the talk, first of all, and I love tying cooking and being tenzo to how you're cooking your life. That's just a really beautiful metaphor. And my favorite part was when you were talking about the beets, right? And like kind of taking a moment to really look at like, why do I really not like them? And like, why do I not like them? And then even if I don't think I do, this is the meal in front of me. How am I going to approach it? And then when you applied that to people, it resonated for me because so many times in my life, I feel like I've met someone initially thought, oh, I don't vibe with that person, or we don't really work well together, or had kind of a judgment or a story. And then we'll have kind of like one pivotal conversation and I'll be like, oh my God, that person, I had no idea that person was so great. And so I just think there's so much value in when we are attached to this idea that we don't like something or someone, to really look at it, and be like, well, is that true? And why? And what's my evidence for that?
Totally.
Yeah, I wish everybody were asparagus.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of beets out there.
There are a lot of beets out there.
I don't eat asparagus.
What'd you say, Tal?
I said, I don't eat asparagus. There you go.
She'll take your beets though.
Tal, what'd you think? Are you a cook?
So interestingly, I'm not, but I have become one. So in the spirit of, I've just been really examining how I'm spending my time in this moment of quarantine. So I'm usually out and about, socializing, having dinner at a different restaurant every night. And it's been just really interesting living alone, and just being really more intentional about where I spend my time, how much time I've been dissipating, I think, just being out and about all the time. So it's just been a really interesting inquiry for me. And to your point about cooking for others, it's become about my parents and like, what can I bring over and what can I, do for them? But I will say this has just been a moment of just reflection and just being really thoughtful and sort of inventorying where have I spent my time and how will that be different? And that includes the cooking and like more farmers market and less dinners out, like all of that has just sort of been a very interesting inquiry for me. So thank you for this and for kind of, fueling where I've been thinking.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tal. And I love your word inventory, right? Taking inventory.
Just like you take inventory of your pantry, yes.
Yeah, you stand there looking at the pantry or the refrigerator and going, what am I going to do? But there's that larger opportunity, as you just said, to take inventory of everything we've got and everything that's available to us. And what do I do with this? What am I going to bake? That metaphor works really well, by the way, any of you that do work out there with other people. I've never had that metaphor fail. You talk about what's in the pantry and what are you going to bake. The same ingredients can make a lot of different things. So what are you going to do with it and to what end? Varda?
I'm reminded something Melissa said of, I'm doing a daily sort of meditation that requires, it's sort of a practice meditation. It requires doing little journaling. And the other day I was asked to journal, to like list, some people who make me uncomfortable. And I started to write the list, and then I suddenly realized like every single person on the planet makes me uncomfortable, including myself. And it's such an eye-opener,
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do I get that one, Varda? I mean, honestly, I've said this before, but I have such profound gratitude for all of you and for the people who couldn't make it today. Because getting ready for Sunday and doing Sundays like saves me from myself every time. Now that we're doing interviews on Wednesday and Thursday evenings, that's 2 more nights a week I get to be saved from myself, right? Maybe I should just fill all my time, and that would be a misuse of ingredients too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's sort of like realizing that being uncomfortable is part of what it means to be us, human, that there's no escaping that. That is part of, what it is to be who we are, is to be uncomfortable with each other. That's part of it.
And with everything, actually.
Yeah.
Nothing really is our preference, but what we create. And then when we get over that preference, we get another one, and we're like, we look back at that other preference you had before, and you're like, that was really stupid. I was such an idiot. But we still have so many more in front of us. Right?
So Philip, who's joining us today?
This is my daughter, Roma.
Pardon me?
This is my daughter, Roma.
Roma.
Hi, Roma.
Hi. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to
Nice to see you.
Yeah. I would love to comment on the talk. And yeah, so for me, the instructions to the cook, it resonates a lot with this relationship that I have with music. Like music, I write a lot of music. I play a lot of different instruments. I play a lot of percussion and guitar and piano. I play piano for an hour a day, and then I've just finishing an album that I've been working on for a year this weekend, and it's like, oh my god, the number of ingredients. Like some of the songs, I think I put too many ingredients in. But then also, I will end up having sometimes challenging relationships with like how much I will be practicing and how much I will be playing, where sometimes it feels like, who am I doing this for? Like who am I cooking for? Am I cooking just for myself right now? Am I well, yeah, who am I doing it for? And like when I'm able to, like last night, I was able to play some music for my daughter and for my girlfriend, and they really enjoy it, and it's a beautiful moment. But then that's like 5 minutes, and it took me an hour or 2 hours to learn the song that I play for them for a small amount of time. So it's like the challenge for me is, how much time do I have to spend prepping the materials in the kitchen for the meal that is going to be a meal that's eaten for this much amount of time.
Yeah, or Philip, it's all the meal.
Yeah.
Where does, this is going to sound familiar to you, where does the meal begin and end?
Yeah. I guess I started cooking the meal of my music when I first started playing music when I was like 5.
Right.
That's it.
And where does this song begin and, or the piece of music begin and end? Does it begin when you start that 5 minutes of playing it, or is everything that piece of music, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the shift. There's another shift of language that I like to share at times. Whenever we hear ourselves say, I have to do this, like all the things I have to do before I can serve the meal or play the piece of music, or all the things I have to do before this happens, is just shift that word have to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do I get to do?
Mm-hmm.
A good friend of ours was talking about having to go down to a conference. This was obviously some time ago, but having to go down to a conference in San Diego where she was being honored. I said, well, if you have to do it, don't go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're honoring you.
Yeah.
Go enjoy that. Right?
Yeah.
Chalet, I am going to call on you because I know you're a great cook.
I guess, do I need to untap myself there? There we go. Something I keep thinking about or coming back to is the idea of dealing with the unexpected or mistakes in cooking. And it just feels like a constant, maybe it's because I make so many mistakes, I don't know. But just part of the experience for me is when something comes up that I'm not expecting, or if things, I guess in a different way of saying it, take a different turn, finding a new way to work with it. And that might even be the ingredients in the pantry. Like if I don't have a certain ingredient for a dish, how am I still going to make this? And I guess that's something I've been kind of thinking about as you've been talking about this, as it reflects life right now, I guess, and how to still make something wonderful and nourishing and tasty while it might not be what you intended to do from the beginning, I guess. That's something I've been thinking about.
Well, I've got nothing to add to that. That was like a very short version of the whole talk. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
So, Chalet, because it's part of all of our training,
Mm-hmm.
and given what you just shared,
Yeah.
You want to say anything about how easy or hard it is for you to share?
Today was better. It's challenging for me to share, but it's getting better.
Did anybody else know that?
No.
Are you seeing the evidence on the screen, Chalet?
What?
Are you seeing the evidence on the screen? I asked, did anybody else know that it's difficult for Chalet to share?
I see that nobody else is coming up on the screen.
Everybody else is shaking their head no.
Thank you. Thanks.
But that's an important one to take in.
Yeah.
Because there's what is so, and then there's what we think is so, right? There's the ingredient and what we think of it.
Yeah.
So beautifully done.
Thank you.
Beautifully done. And this is an important part of our training, as some of you know, is sitting on the front of the chair at the front of the class, raising your hand, speaking up, going when it's time to go.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Just going. Just doing it. Stepping up when it's time to step up. Okay, Marsh, Art, you guys are wisdom in the room. I'm not letting you off so easily this week. Got anything to add? I'll unmute you.
In this particular time, because I love to cook, we have not been eating out or taking out food like at the same pace we do. And we're in a community that only has several restaurants. There are not a lot of places. And the places that are our regular places really need support. And so part of what we need to be more of is more takeout, which is kind of an ironic thing because I'm really quite content to just stay home and cook my life. But another thing that occurs to me is I cooked a studio, and that studio is gone now. And so I need to take some time and think about how going forward I'm going to be cooking with my artwork.
What do you mean you lost your studio?
Well, I mean, I don't have models and I don't have people coming to the studio. So in that sense of the group of people, it's gone, you know.
At least temporarily.
At least for a good time, yeah.
Great time to innovate.
Yeah, you too, Lori.
Yeah, how do we work with what's with us?
Yes.
Ken, I've never actually talked to you about cooking for all the many billions of hours we've spent on the trail.
And for good reason. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Again, for some reason, my laptop would not allow me to check in this morning, but I was able to go back to the original email and click on 9 o'clock join on my phone. So this is a new format for me. All the instructions and guiding is all different, so I don't know if I'm being heard or any of that stuff.
It's working.
Anyway, good. Again, thank you for the talk and the sit. And yes, my short walk around my massage table. But no matter how you slice it, Dan, I'm not a good cook. In fact, I don't consider myself a cook at all. Clients ask me, "Oh, Ken, what do you eat?" And I say, "Well, you know, I have a can opener and a can and a pot." So I am not a cook. Yes, I can make eggs in a pan or in a pot of boiling water, or I can make pancakes. Yeah, pancakes. And then it ends, you know. So I'm a ramen kind of guy. I found that as I've gotten older, I eat less. I don't know why. I just do, or don't do. So I'm keeping up my level of activity, although I'm replacing running with walking, because running with a face mask is like running uphill for 6 miles. I'm like, oh my word. So I've been walking. But what I've discovered in this time of containment is that I miss the actual physicality of my work. I didn't realize or appreciate what that did for me. You know, it's almost like the ditch digger not being able to dig a ditch anymore. You know, the shovel sitting alongside the shed and, you know, it's not being used. So in that sense, I've noticed those kinds of changes in my body. I feel less, how should I say this? I don't feel as strong as I did when I was working, which is an odd thing, you know, because as an endurance athlete like you and Laurie, I mean, you know that in order to build strength, you use strength. You use energy to build energy. And so I'm not using that energy. And so I'm feeling not necessarily weak, but just not as strong, which is a strange feeling for me being an athlete. And of course, I can't play tennis. I can't golf. I can't go to the beach and body surf. It's like, you know. But Varda and Schley and Tal brought up that great word which you mentioned in your talk, which is ingredients. Even though I'm a minimal cook, and even though I'm a minimalist in living, I still have to have ingredients. There's no such thing as no ingredients, you know? And so maybe my pantry is a lot barer than yours, but there's still stuff in it.
Yeah.
And I've found that in this time of being isolated hasn't changed my list of ingredients. I still get, and that's made me realize that now when I'm forced to look at life in a minimal way, I've come to the realization that that's how I've always lived. I've always lived my life with the barest amount of ingredients. Now that makes for boring meals. Yes, it does, which is why you may invite me to dinner anytime after this is lifted. And I hope I can keep my end of conversation up. But yeah, it's just, I've come to understand that in a microcosmic way, this is the way I've always lived. Nothing has changed. And for that, I am extremely grateful. Extremely grateful.
I want to jump in and offer a perspective as a friend and Sangha member, is if you broaden that aperture of what you're cooking but beyond what you're putting in your mouth, right?
Mm-hmm.
You, unlike many people I've known over time, have a remarkable ability to take a minimal set of ingredients and create beauty out of it. If you look at your life, okay. Ken is a massage therapist, Lomi and Reiki, and does body work, right?
Yeah, shiatsu as well.
Shiatsu as well. Qigong practitioner,
Yes.
and has chosen to live in a very small space, which you also work in, and truly is a minimalist. But I think any of you that have spent any time with Ken would say there's no lack of nutrition in that meal due to limited ingredients. So I think that is the lesson of this teaching as well. That's why we're working with instructions to the cook, because it's not just about what goes into our mouths, but it's about what comes out of our lives.
Yes.
And you need to give yourself a lot of credit for that.
Thank you.
We're right at the top of the hour. Anybody have anything else before we close out? Okay. We will, and Varda, Patrick, since this is your first time with the Zoom gathering, we know that the communal chanting via Zoom is completely out of sync. But people like hearing each other's voices, so we just go with it anyway. All right, so enjoy.
All right, here we go.
Numberless.
I
vow
to say
desires are inexhaustible.
I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way unsurpassable. I vow to attain
and numberless.
I vow
I vow
to
save
to
them.
save them.
These
Desires are inexhaustible. I vow
vow
to put
an
an
end to them.
the
dharmas
dharma
are boundless.
Boundless.
I
I vow to master them.
The Buddha way
Ways unsurpassable.
I
I
vow
vow to attain it. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow
to
to
save
save
them.
them. Desires are inexhaustible.
I
I
vow
vow
to put
to
an
put an end to them.
The
The
dharmas are
boundless.
I
I vow to master them.
the
The Buddha ways unsurpassable. I vow to attain it.
That was particularly crazy.
You'll remember when we were all meeting together how insistent I was on we're going to perfect this chanting. We're going to get this chanting so it is the this one voice. You will not be able to tell any distinction. And here we are.
The universe had another idea.
Yeah.
I heard Soleil loud and clear.
So anyway,
Oh gosh.
book club 6 p.m. on Tuesday for anybody that's interested. There are links to Andrea in the newsletter. Please reach out to her. Like I said, we'll keep it casual, informal. My intention is for it not to be a lot of Dan talking, but for us sharing. So I'll contribute where needed. But that should be fun. I had something for Dylan. I wanted to ask Dylan if he got his sutra book, but he dropped off here. If anybody wants a sutra book, just drop either Lori or me a line and we'll mail to you. Okay?
Mhm.
We got a whole bunch of those delivered right before we all went into lockdown. Likewise, we got an order of 10 new cushions. So if anybody wants a set of cushions that they want to buy, there's new ones available. And if you want to borrow them during this period, Philip came by to grab one. But feel free to stop by and borrow a set of cushions. Thanks everybody for your support and contributions. You all know that announcement. Nobody's getting paid here or anywhere else. It's all going into the pot. And we do this because we love to cook our lives.
Figuratively and literally.
Thanks very much.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks for joining
Thank
me.
you.
It's great to see you guys.
Back.
Bye.
Bye.
Mwah.